Happy New Year, my dear friends! I hope you all had a wonderful New Year during the 1st of January, and whatever wishes and goals you have, I hope you can achieve them this year. Even if you couldn't, then remember that everything you do is one step closer to your dreams. Of course, that goes the same for me as well. This year, I want to achieve at least 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2026, so help me out, and if we can do that, I'll C6 R5 to Sarissa when she comes out. This is serious shit, by the way, so do it. Anyways, we just got a new special program for the Luna 4 update, and I am, of course, excited. I believe all of them are super anticipated characters, from Iglua, man, his voice is deeper than I expected, to Zibai, which of course is my most awaited character, and finally, the moon goddess herself, Columbina. Aside from Zibai, who is the literal mention of an old lore, we also got Mondstadt, Sumeru, and Fontaine lore as well, the Court of Sealis, Dechret, and even the North Citizen Court's Ordo, which if you read all of them and do all of the quests, this update is definitely stacked. There might even be a chance that Sandrone is going to... You know what, I'm not going to say anything about that, so stay tuned to find out. As always, don't forget to give this video a like and comment so the channel can be noticed by the algorithm. My name is Neko Gitsune, and I make lore and commentary videos on this channel to keep you company. New Year is finally here, and so are the new characters. In the next update, we'll be getting Columbina and Zibai as the new limited characters, where Columbina will be a new Luna support that enhances Luna reaction playstyle, while Zibai will be a new Geo main DPS that introduces Luna Crystallize to the game. I personally am pulling for these characters myself, and if you need extra Pama gems to pull for these characters, then allow me to introduce you to Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a reliable site for a fast, secure, and super reliable top-up experience for your Genesis Crystal. Additionally, they provide 25% discounts compared to normal prices in-game and supports consoles as well. Loot Bar provides a special discount each update and also a guaranteed bundle, and to celebrate Luna 4's release, Loot Bar offers Welkin Moon at a discounted rate for a limited time. Not only that, Loot Bar is holding a lucky spin event called the Moon of 4, where you can score discount coupons, Welkin, and even a guaranteed Columbina bundle worth 180 pulls. No need to top up, just log in and share daily for free spins, and your first spin is a guaranteed win, so be sure to check it out. Once you start your top up, they will only ask for your UID, nothing else, so your privacy is guaranteed, and your items will arrive to your accounts in less than 2 minutes. If you like Miliastra Wonderland, you can also top up Kernel Nexus in Loot Bar the same way as you do it with Genesis Crystals. Over 30,000 Trustpilot reviews are showing their satisfaction after using Loot Bar, and if you have any problem with your transaction, their customer service is always available if you need assistance. Other than Genshin Impact, Loot Bar is also available for other games as well, such as Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves, Sailor Zone Zero, etc. Click the link in the description below and register to get an additional 10% coupon that can be combined with all of the discounts, and don't miss out on Loot Bar's The Moon of 4 event. Now let's continue with the content. Even though we should talk about the Lantern Rite first because of it being the very first thing they introduced in the teaser, we'll start with the Archon quest first, as Lantern Rite in itself is likely going to play out in the second half of the update. Note that this year's Lantern Rite is going to be permanent, which means that just like Tanot Sitalk, this Lantern Rite is going to be very low relevant towards the entirety of Genshin's storyline. With that said, let's start with the new area. So this place here is where we finally get to visit 3 major places that are already mentioned: Pillar of Embla as per the Frostmoon Scions, Pyramida as the Lightkeepers' main headquarters, and finally, the Court of Sealis in Lake Amsvartnir. Pillar of Embla is where the first moon chanter of the Frostmoon Scions named Ayla stopped the abyssal monsters to continue ravaging in Notcry. She was aided by Solofe, the first Lightkeepers and Torch Forger at that time, and the statue in Pyramida is likely the figure of Solofe. He is jacked, I have to say. It seems this place is highly contaminated by abyssal energy as shown in the special program, which is not surprising given it is the same place where the abyssal invasion peaked at that time as per the developers. There's also the Court of Sealis in Lake Amsvartnir, and it seems this area is indeed that lake, as the developers say that we'll be creating some houses for the Sealis to live in. I assume there might be more than just this, since they say an angel lives here, and I already made a whole video about this, so check it out when you have the time. But just for TLDR, this place is already mentioned in Etherlight's Spindleloot and a 1.0 book called A Drunkard's Tale, where a wolf met an angel that is not aligned with the first angel's ideals. This angel likely has connections with Boreas and possibly the one that gave him his powers today, so it's good to assume that this angel will play a huge role in Mondstadt. Now, the developers say that Dottore obtained the power of the moon mirrors already. As far as the story goes, that part isn't true, but he missed the third moon as Columbina jumped inside the moon gate. We also learn further that Dottore is trying to swallow not cry whole, which as far as it goes relates to three things, that being Columbina, the fourth moon, and Sumeru. I know, Sumeru again, really? But hear me out. If you find the visuals in his attack animation or even his design to be so familiar, well, that's because we have already seen it before. Deshret's technology. I made a whole video talking about it already, but to put it simply, all this relates to the Luna 2 limited event where Thoth talks about the 7 pillars and ZhanZhu at the end of the quest. Not only that, this also relates to the assignment boss description, King Deshret's ambition to rebel against the heavenly principles, and also Nabu Malikata, where she reveals to Deshret to continue on with his plans, but remember to believe in the power of humanity. The connection to him is quite simple. ZhanZhu frequently does his research in the desert. There are many of his notes that indicate it to be that way, whether experimenting on people that relates to Elazar, exploring the ruins of Gurabat and Tuletula, and it's not limited to the 7 pillars and Deshret as implied in the event. When I made that video, one thing I did not put in mind was how Deshret and ZhanZhu are the same person, and I still do. However, their connection could be a lot deeper than that, because the more I think about it, their resemblance is scarily uncanny. First of all, the knowledge that Nabu Malikata gave to Deshret is not the forbidden knowledge. That part was already introduced to Teyvat during the funerary year when Nibelang returned to Teyvat, so Nabu Malikata's knowledge is very likely to be about the false sky and the power of the three moon goddesses, as the heavenly principles tried to hide this information from everyone in Teyvat. In fact, he made the goddesses slowly wither away as they are now seen as a threat, hence why Columbina felt like she is always rejected by Teyvat. Secondly, Deshret was implied to be able to separate his mortal body and his soul, and is shown to be a one-eyed ruler as per the description in Sumeru's lore so far, which is really scary to think about because Dottore is the opposite of that, where he covers his eyes with his mask. And not only that, assuming the power is similar, it's good to assume that Dottore's power in creating his sections is quite similar to Deshret, where he separates his mind from his mortal body, hence why despite being a human, he is able to continuously sustain himself. Also, in his boss battle, Dottore is shown with a new mask that shows this red eye, literally a similar eye to Deshret as he has one in his pupil and is often described as Red King. Finally, both Deshret and Dottore have one thing in common: God complex. Don't get me wrong, Deshret is already a god, but what makes them so similar is how both find their own rules to be better than the heavenly principles. Dottore can literally be shown in his own cutscene as implied he needed the power of the three moon goddesses to be a new god, while Deshret says so himself in Staff of Scarlet Sands, implying his own rules to be far more superior than the heavenly principles. Look, the heavenly principles is not a nice entity either, and despite that, I am neutral on him and Nibelang. But that said, Deshret's statement finding his own rules far more superior is still a yikes. Like, excuse me? Since I talked about the moons earlier, this is still related to Dottore, but Sandrone mentioned Rene's discovery about the three moon goddesses and also his prophecy of the world's ending. If you don't remember, Rene created the Natsusunkur's Ordo in order to avoid Fontaine's prophecy from being fulfilled. However, one thing I always find strange about it is that it seems Rene's discovery is not about Fontaine specifically. Of course, it is one of them, and he did mention the world's ending using Kainvia's world formula that no matter the calculations, Teyvat's fate is that it will be destroyed, the same thing that the Voyager states in the finale of the Deep Galleries. After all, he is the very first person we ever get a mention of Hyperborea, not counting the BP weapon in this case, and also how one can become a Descender. The Book of Esoteric Revelation is also the same, where it basically tells the fate of Teyvat, where in this case, it seems he knew that Teyvat's sky is indeed false. If you enter the book, you will see the ancient civilization ruins with a sky that seems to have split. He also tries to become a Descender himself in order to avoid this from happening. So So of course, it is not a surprise if he also knows the existence of the three moon goddesses. However, one thing that he did mention is how Tevat seems to be in a time loop. He mentions all of the civilizations, which are Hyperborea, Natlantia, and Remuria, where all of these do exist. Hyperborea is self-explanatory, Natlantia is where we now know as the city of Talon in Natlan, while Remuria is the sea of bygone eras. Three civilizations, three moons. The final name is Kron Aria, which is what we are currently experiencing, and with that exists the fourth moon that has not yet ascended, Columbina. It's the same with what Sandrone told us. She used to detect three moons, but now there's four of them, very likely referencing Columbina. This makes more sense because it's likely because Columbina time traveled, making herself as a moon goddess in the past, and finally at some point meeting Deshret and making him along with Nabu Malikata to create the city of Moon Maiden, or also known as Icanum. After all, the power of the three moon goddesses seems important enough for Dottore, so no surprise if he eventually knew about this himself. Finally, it all matches with Not Cry theme, where Aurora sang a song that seems to be narrated by the Frost Moon herself. Columbina finally ascended and became the new moon, or perhaps what the game refers to as the Welkin moon. This explains the name of Not Cry's Archon quest's title, The Song of Welkin Moon, or in this case, Columbina's song. Okay, so by the time this video is out, it's already been a week since the live stream was live. Basically, I had to take care of my mother, took her out of the country, and then I got sick, hence why the video is late. But regardless, there's something weird I found about Columbina time travel theory, because even though I find it plausible, I don't think it's time travel specifically, per se. Now don't get me wrong, the concept is there, and I even made a video about it. But there's one big hole that I find is not explained enough. Until by the time I'm editing, which is right now. If you guys don't remember, the concept of time traveling in Genshin is not new. In fact, we saw it happen 3 times already. The Sacred Sakura as the earliest concept, the Space and Time for You Archon quest, and finally, Bakunawa. All these 3 are related to one single shade, Istaroth, the ruler of time. If you remember how it all happened, every single one of them relates to how Istaroth meant time and history, where it all happened in a different time and space. Let me explain one by one in the simplest way possible. For the Sacred Sakura, it all happened in Makoto's realm of consciousness. To put it simply, Makoto asked Istaroth's help to move the Sacred Sakura into the past, so Inazuma can survive the cataclysm. Only A remembered that the Sacred Sakura was not there, and the reason is simple, because she is the trigger for it to happen. The Space and Time for You is similar concept, where in this case, Tiradith and the Traveler's sibling are the trigger for the cataclysm to happen in the first place, and Istaroth was directly involved in this matter. For Bakunawa, this one is still odd, but based on my understanding, it is Rindauder's most horrendous creation and corrupted time itself. Since it all happened in Natlan's Marijivari, Fenty has to sweep the entire region away with Istaroth's permission. Fenty is a part of Istaroth, so with that, she is still involved in that incident, albeit indirectly. 3 of these incidents have the same thing in common. In order to quote-unquote time travel or history to change, there needs to be a different time and space for it all to happen. This could only mean one thing: Istaroth is directly involved in Columbina's quote-unquote time travel. I also have had this strange idea in mind ever since Not Quite was introduced, albeit I don't know how to say it directly, because what if, just like Simulanka, Not Cry is a mirror? Of course, that's not really my thoughts, but it is the closest to what I can say because the idea in itself is very raw. The new Columbina teaser seems to support this as well, where she feels like on the true moon, but she is not. The description of the trail also says, "Night frost clings to her wings, rousing her from a sweet dream. Fate, like a silken web, lies curled within a cage forgotten by time." Forgotten by time is a recurring theme in Genshin Impact, and it's also related to erosion, which is a part of Istaroth's power. So, if we take the quote in Hymns of the Far North again, this seems to be the time where the shades finally intervene, and in this case, Istaroth is the first person to make her move ever since Columbina jumped into the moon gates, where she actually protect her from being destroyed or killed by Dottore. This could explain many things I talk about in my videos, where the city of Arcanum is indeed made based on Columbina, and history reveals itself the moment Istaroth meant time in different time and space. Istaroth's appearance became more apparent ever since Natlan, and she is involved in all of those scenarios twice. In Luna Patches, she appeared with the most interesting entry in Hymns of the Far North, and also directly narrated Zibai's introduction. So, take it with a huge grain of salt, but if the Shades appear in this Archon quest, then Istaroth should be the very first person to appear in this matter. Another thing that I find interesting here is that Dottore seems to be sucking up all of Not-Cry for some reason. If you don't remember, Not-Cry, while is implied to be a land rich in Guvaki because of the Eternal Moon Marrow's moon dust, in reality is actually more than that. It could be true that the Eternal Moon Marrow's power covers up all of Not-Cry, but in actuality, Not-Cry in itself is a huge chunk of moon that failed to ascend when Nibelung created the three moon goddesses. However, this statement on its own is strange because it's either that or it's actually the fourth moon that failed to ascend. That in itself is also strange because it splits into two different categories. Either this fourth moon was intended to begin with, or it was created by the dragons of Natlan as implied in Innafa's signature weapon, the Fractured Halo. Since this is assuming that Dottore did not obtain Columbina's moon marrow as she already sent herself to wherever the moon gate sent her to, it made sense for Dottore to actually create the third moon himself from Not-Cry's lands, because Columbina is the reincarnation of Frost Moon and Not-Cry is her moon. Speaking of the Frost Moon, what is shown beyond the false sky by Dottore is indeed the Frost Moon's moon, as her moon is the only one that is left intact. But it's also possible that this moon is Dottore's moon, as his title is called the False Moon. But again, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. Also, this is a final nail in the coffin that Dottore is using Deshret's technology. But if you haven't finished Sumeru's exploration just yet, you might find the exact same color palette and glow as Dottore's eyes and some of his power. Like I said, Sumeru is likely going to have a huge role in this quest, let alone Nicole, who is an angel, also going to show her angelic powers to help the gang to fight Dottore. Speaking of her, there's an interesting thing I find about her. First of all, it's possible that Nicole's wings are upside down. Generally speaking, you can't really fly like that because the weight is on the bottom, which in this case, it weighs you down. It seems her halo is the same case as well, but in this case, it seems this is what an angel looks like when they break free from their crowns. If you don't remember, angels have crowns on them before they were turned into a silly. They used to be imbued with 7 elements, and in this case, Nicole's color palette resembles more of what we see with the Traveler. Light. This could mean that her power, instead of using the 7 elements, is using the primordial power of Teyvat's energy, the Light Realm. This also explains why Zibai doesn't have a crown with her and has a similar tiara that she can place whenever she wants during her fights. It doesn't resemble Geo either, and just like Nicole, it seems it came from another source. In any case, I think we'll get more lore about the angels in this update, as they seem to be quite prominent in this update, with Nicole showing off her true powers while Zibai made an appearance to protect Liyue from the eclipse that is happening in there. So perhaps we might get some lore about Nabu Malikata as well, and with Renee getting a mention here, we might get more lore about Sibylla as well. Since we talk about Nabu Malikata, let me show you something even more eerie. I actually got this theory from Mother of Birds, but here's my version. You see, in this scene, we see something suddenly thrown down at the end of the trailer. It is possible that it's Dottore's power, but at the same time, the explosion is a bit off because it doesn't really show Dottore's usual power with Deshret's technology and all that shebang. It's either 3 of these things. 1. Columbina came back and tried to stop Dottore. 2. It is Dottore's power and we just overthink it. And 3rd, a celestial nail being cast down at Dottore. Now frankly, the 3rd one is a bit of a stretch because celestial nails were cast down in order to cleanse the abyss from Teyvat. But at the same time, there's still one nail unused in God's Limits trailer, so it's possible that a nail is being cast down in here. To me, I don't think it's the heavenly principles, but rather the shades. Remember, the shades will intervene in not Christ's Archon quest, and the literal reason for God's Limits to happen is them unable to sit down watching the people of Teyvat rebelling against the heavenly principles. The Fatui, even though one of our cult Ceresa's power to be paltry, is a huge threat for the heavenly principles, and is the main reason why the shades wanted to intervene to begin with. And what does this have to do with Nabumalikata, you ask? Well, let me read you a line in the legendary Flower of Paradise Lost. But the Lord of Flowers herself drew enlightenment from the exchange. It had been within her calculus. Something long foreseen. The desert and oasis were sovereigns most high, yet held wide thoughts of rebellion the most strongly. I shall keep your secrets on account of the feelings my heart holds for you and the Lord of Wisdom. I shall fashion you a bridge to allow you to slake your deepest wants. But you must fear not the crystalline sapphire nail. I will deliver you unto higher knowledge, but as I have warned, you are fated to lose much in this exchange. Nevertheless, hide my lesson in your heart. Remember the punishment that once was inflicted on the fallen envoys of heaven. Know this. If there is to be hope in this world, it will be found kindling within mortals most ordinary. So in other words, if the nail is indeed cast down on Dottore, Nabumalikata already saw it coming. Heed my warnings. Seek not the master of the four shades, and inquire not the mysteries of the sky and the abyss. Otherwise, as shown by the nail of retribution, certain calamity and sorrow shall follow. Alright, that was a nice talk. Now let's move on to the next topic, the Lantern Rite. Heads up, I know a lot of people really want me to spell these names correctly, as in with pinyin, because the last time I spelled Zibai's name with English localization, people were not happy about it, so I'll do my best with all of these names. If you can speak Chinese or local, I'm so sorry for what you're about to hear. So, in the next Lantern Rite, the main star of the show is of course Zibai, who is introduced to us as the legendary White Horse Adeptus. Well, she's so beautiful. I might even have to go bankrupt just to get her later. Like for real, I am more excited to get her over Columbina and Farca. Heck, I would have gone for her C6 if it wasn't for me losing to a bet I did a few months ago. And I have to C6 this stupid lore skipper. Now, I already told you guys that Zibai is not an Adeptus, but rather an angel. She did however become well known as an Adeptus by the people of Liyue, but in the 2025 Lantern Rite, she is not classified under the term of Adeptus. In fact, the developers sort of acknowledged this since they basically said whether it's true or not, the players have to find out for themselves. They even show Azure Light's weapon description because Zibai is mentioned in that weapon as an angel who is destined to wait for an encounter. Again, I made a whole video dedicated to her, so you can watch that if you're interested, but let's talk about what we can expect later. Since the developers imply her as an Adeptus, we'll call her as one for now. So Lantern Rite always has its own theme, and each year is always different. For example, last year was dedicated to an Adeptus by the name of Tao Du, and this year is no different where the Adeptus in question is the White Horse Adeptus, famous for appearing in Moonlit Babu Forest and Springs of the Hidden Jade. In the last Lantern Rite, she is mentioned as the gold-eyed Sladen Mare. The fun thing about this is that this year in the Chinese calendar is also the year of the horse, more specifically the fire horse. So they could make Zibai as Pyro if they wanted to, but I suppose they have to keep it for Nicole instead. But anyways, in the trailer, we are shown Zibai to have been standing on top of Liyue Harbor in a different space. That's because according to Springs of Hidden Jade, it is said that she kept on hiding her tracks on Stella Fortuna and galloping the sky. So when they showed Zibai in this dark space, it's possible that she is somewhere around the fall sky, or maybe even within someone's constellation. However, they also show a different abode for Zibai, which means that this is likely an adeptal realm dedicated for Zibai herself. The only way for us to enter this place seems to be in Qingse village as per the special program, and even though I am aware that this place seems to be in Chenyu Vale, I don't think it is, because if you look closely, the terrain surrounding it is different. Instead, this place seems to be where we can actually visit Zibai's abode, because if you remember, this is the same looking gate that transports us to Fu Jin's abode. It's quite interesting to think about because this seems to be the hidden jade that is mentioned in the Springs of Hidden Jade. The chariot that Zibai's rode seems to be related to either of the two things, the silver carriage or the solar chariot. Now, I doubt it'll be the silver carriage because in Moonlit's Bamboo Forest, it was the Moon Sistresses that brought them to cycle their government over Teyvat. Solar chariot is the most likely answer, but even then, I doubt it to be the same chariot either. The solar chariot was said to have fallen during the funerary year, the same time when the moon goddesses perished. Now, the story of this chariot is very ambiguous, as one story says that it is an item, but another says that it's a god. Whatever the case might be, it is clear that this chariot is related to Zibai and possibly even related to Zhongli. Also, since Lantern Rite will play out after the events of the Archon quest, this means that what happened in Liyue later is related to what happened after the events in Outcry. This is not the first time that Lantern Rite does this, as the 2025 Lantern Rite does this as well, where the events in Atlan made a huge impact in Liyue's ley lines as per Ning Guang's speculation. It seems the case this time will be different, as Genshin's developers made the quest permanent, making it clear that this year's Lantern Rite will be more than just a yearly event, but a canon lore that will be relevant in future patches. This could imply that Zibai will likely make an appearance in future Archon quests because she herself is an angel. I personally don't think that Zibai will make an appearance in the current Archon quest directly, but at best might make some sort of small cameo or voice since Nicole is the same race as her. In any case, there is also interesting phenomena that they show, which is apparently the lunar eclipse. In this case, there's a tale in Liyue's legend by the name of ZhanZhu, the Moon Devourer, or basically what people of Liyue call the lunar eclipse. This, however, could be more than just that, since Zhongli seems to make big deal out of it, but again, we got bamboozled plenty of times about event quests in trailer, so I won't go too deep on that, but it's possible that ZhanZhu is this toad-looking god that blocks the moon, with Zibai seems to try and defeat it. But at the same time, I do think this is quite concerning because the moon in Teyvat is false, and Zibai is aware of this. So for a lunar eclipse to happen in Teyvat seems rather strange because what sort of entity is trying to block a false moon anyway? And at the same time, it's very unlikely for this to be a bad thing either. Well, at least in real life it doesn't seem to be that way. In Chinese mythology, ZhanZhu seems to be inspired by a toad god by the name of Jin Chan, and coincidentally has another name that is similar as ZhanZhu by the name of Chan Chu, or its full name as Jiao Cai Chan Chu, all translated as golden toad, toad, and lucky toad respectively. If you're a native, yes, I know, but I'm doing my best. ZhanZhu is also translated as a toad, and from what I researched, it seems it's just another name for Chanchu, and this god specifically is the same as Genshin's ZhanZhu, where it devours a moon. In fact, when I say that this god's appearance is not a bad thing, it kinda is not, because it's a sign of prosperity as it guards you from bad luck. However, like I always said whenever I link real life references, what is made in Genshin is not reflected in real life either, so it's possible that this ZhanZhu is in its own context. In fact, this is the second time we have a Moon Devourer in Genshin, because the Bakunawa is the same as ZhanZhu, where its real life mythology is also a Moon Devourer based on Philippines mythology. Now this opens up a new rabbit hole, doesn't it? Because it's possible that this Lantern Rite is connected to Natlan as well. We still have no idea why Liyue's 2025 event is even related to Natlan's Net Kingdom, and with a Moon Devourer in place, it's possible that this might answer why that's the case as well. Besides, ZhanZhu seems to be a bad thing since this place is suddenly devoured with water, possibly the doing of ZhanZhu. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Now before we end this video, I want to mention the teased characters. Basically, this is Lohen, Farka, Nicole, Gretel, and Linnea respectively, and all of them are already mentioned by the playable characters from the Archon quest, in this case Lohen, the last Dragon Spine event, in this case Gretel, and from dialogues from Innefa and Aino, in this case Linnea. The final character, however, is interesting because the moment they teased this is where my eyes went into. You see, this is no doubt Sandrone, as the reflection in the water is literally her. However, what makes it interesting is why she doesn't have her own model. Well, there are many possibilities, but one thing for sure, Sandrone will not survive the Luna 4 Archon quest. This could mean that she'll likely attempt something very extreme to save Columbina and get her grubby little hands to kill Dottore. She even lunged at him because Bologna likely got crushed in this one scene. So you might ask, why? Well, it's easy really. You see, Sandrone is no doubt connected to the Narcissan Croyd's questline, and they even made sure that it will play a huge role in the Song of Vulcan Moon, as they teased it plenty of times already. The popular theory right now is that Sandrone is Marianne, this girl over here, and is created by Alan himself. Now, the first half of the theory seems to be debunked because Sandrone never took Alan as her own brother, but the second half of it is likely true, where Alan created Sandrone based on his stepsister's model, Marianne. With that said, there are 4 Mariannes that exist in the game. Marianne, who is already dead, the Oceanite Marianne and Anne, and finally, Sandrone, who is modeled after Marianne's body. Funnily enough, the Oceanite Marianne and Anne are currently exploring Teyvat, and Marianne even say that they'll eventually venture to the ancient ruins of Hyperborea. So, it's possible that Sandrone's playable character will be related to Marianne and Anne eventually, and probably be a new model too, because right now, there is no vision or moon wheel that exists in Sandrone. The only thing that we know, however, is that Sandrone is using the Arc system, basically Numa and Uzia, to fight against her enemies, and likely using it on her machines as well. So, if Sandrone is playable, she likely gets a new model, and instead of a machine, she likely gets an actual body this time. Also, let me indulge your brains a bit. Are you ready? What if Sandrone is still an Oceanite that didn't get to become a true human? In Fontaine's Archon quest, Neuvillette turned Fontanians into true humans, as they are actually Oceanites. Emily further confirms this to be the case in her character story 5, as Fontanians now have the same blood vessels as other humans in Teyvat. Oh my god, Emily mentioned, who would have guessed, hey? Now, I made a theory in this channel that Sandrone is modeled after Marianne's body, but also likely containing parts of Marianne's Oceanite's body. So, I'm willing to bet if Sandrone eventually gets killed by Dottore, she likely turned into a puddle. I'm sorry, I really am. But again, Sandrone's body is mechanical, and she said it herself. It's possible that because her property is different, Neuvillette's blessing ended up taking no effect on her, and technically speaking, Marianne is already dead, so there's no possible way of making Marianne a true human after all. Another possibility is that Sandrone got deleted from the Irminsul, which is similar to Scaramouche, who is now turned into Wanderer. I only say this because Scaramouche's reflection is shown in Moonlit's Ballad of the Night, and if we got another Wanderer treatment with Sandrone, it's possible that her lore is similar to that as well. In fact, this matches very well with two things: Narcissan Quartz Node's achievement description and Columbina's statement about the water. The achievement says, "What left its name behind? What lies spread all over the valley? What reflects itself in the mirror water? What symbolizes the lonely, world-saving sacrifice?" As for Columbina,
in the water, the future mirrors the past.
So, if Sandrone indeed got deleted, then her playable character will be that she got an entirely new model and possibly turned into an actual human. I initially wanted to make this video short, but like your typical Nekogitsune style, I ended up making this longer than I should. I fell into so many rabbit holes, but hey, it's worth the wait now. I made your brain juice produce more juice, and my brain now explodes. You're welcome. In any case, what are your thoughts about Luna 4? Let me know in the comments. Jana!